All right, man. Here we are. This is the home stretch. This is it. This is what we've been working towards all off season. We are starting our draft prep shows, and we're going to kick this thing off with quarterbacks tonight. So, welcome in one and all to the Fantasy Football Podcast. Shane Peterson here, live. If you're looking at our video, you'll see Greg is in his car because his children are sleeping. And apparently, I'm less considerate because mine are also sleeping, but it doesn't matter.
You have a bigger house than me. I have nowhere to go.
Yeah, my,
This
my
is how
kids are
I've
like
done many of
over
these
here.
podcasts over the months in the car, in the garage, sometimes in the
Even
driveway.
in Yeah, even in the dead of winter, right? Like, there's been times it's been raining. I think we've heard the rain on your podcast on your
Yes.
your side.
I,
Well,
what,
we
what can I
appreciate you
say?
being a trooper, bringing this thing for the people. You're really putting it in, Greg.
Well, I just hope the audio quality is okay because it doesn't feel okay. But maybe it sounds good. I don't know. I'm in an enclosed box. It's kind of, I don't know.
Basically, I mean, I think this is what a studio, like a sound studio, is. I think you've got it figured out. Who needs
I
a
don't think
special
so,
fancy
but
booth?
sure.
Yeah, I can't do it in my master closet. That's apparently one of the tricks of the trade. I don't think my wife would appreciate that at this hour, but this is an exciting conversation. This is real. I think I saw that right now, as of this recording, we're a month out exactly from opening night. We had the Hall of Fame game this past week. Got to watch some preseason. Did you catch any of that game?
I didn't watch the game at all. I just got back from vacation, but I did, I've been an avid Peyton Manning fan on this podcast, and so his speech was great. Um, but I don't know. I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but no, I didn't see the game. Is there any notable takeaways for you?
Well, for a second there, it looked like Chase Claypool hurt himself. That would have been a notable takeaway. But of course, he's laying out for a ball in a preseason game. So I mean, Chase Claypool's a dude. But it was fun to watch. Najee Harris got some tote. Not all that exciting. But it was fun to watch football. The ratings were through the roof for a preseason game, even competing with the Olympics. So it was. We're not alone in enthusiasm around this.
Yeah, there was a Twitter video, and it was like Harris's first carry was a first down, like making a big deal out of that. I don't know. Did he look good or
He
average?
looked fine. I mean, this is it looked like a preseason game on both sides. I think it was there was a bunch of missed kicks and an extra point that was missed, and I think it was 9-3 by the time I moved on with my evening. Somewhere in the third quarter, pretty lackluster. Ben DiNucci looking good for the Cowboys. Yeah, I mean, don't
Okay.
sleep on Ben DiNucci.
How much did Dak play?
I don't I don't think Dak played at all.
He didn't play at all, so I'm an idiot.
No, I don't.
So,
Has Dak even practiced?
well, that's
Well,
what I
we should probably talk about that. Well, I
we were
think
going to
we
talk
will
about
talk
that. I
about
know he's
this.
had some like an additional injury on top of the recovering from the ankle, but yeah, we can talk about that later. So,
Well, let's jump in on this then. So really to lead this off, I think it's important to note, and we talked about this on our mock draft recap show, but thinking about the quarterback position, seemingly over the last several years, as you look at the quarterback position heading into your draft, there's a lot of depth there. I think this year it really is crazy how much depth there is at the quarterback position. But there's sort of a philosophical approach that you need to take to this. What do you want out of your quarterback, and what does it mean to you? So when do you go get your guy? But there's a clear premium on mobile QBs. They add something else to their game that you can't get from some of our statuesque quarterbacks. But there's some guys that second, third, fourth tier down that we're pretty excited about and think you could really do some great things with your fantasy team looking at those guys. So I think there's a lot of interesting strategy around how you draft a quarterback this year.
yeah, we've talked about this, a fair amount as far as our thoughts on the value of the position in general. You mentioned the premium on the mobile quarterback, and it made me think because Lamar Jackson finished what QB like eight or I forget it. I don't have the rankings in front of me. 10, 8 or 10. Good job. All right. Thanks for the visual cue there.
I gotcha.
So, like, there is a premium there, but where did Herbert finish last year?
Well,
Where
but
you're,
to I'm actually lumping him in there because of I mean, what do you I think Herbert had like
well,
5
that's
rushing
fair.
touchdowns. So I think the point is that you know, even if Ben Roethlisberger's arm hadn't turned into a noodle, you would start to see separation. And this is why, you know, I'll tell you about this later. I'm not in love with Tom Brady despite having this amazing high flying offense. There's still a differentiator. And even Tom gets his sneaks a couple times a game, but I think maybe at age 42 or whatever he is, they might stop having him get piled on by 300-pound men. But um, I think one of the quick things that we can get out of the way, if you've been listening for a while, you know I have a little bit of a man crush on Carson Wentz. I'm very hopeful that he has a resurgence in his career, and I thought this move to Indianapolis was a really great thing for him. But he has a foot, and I never ended up hearing what it was. I don't know if it was. I always think of Lisa Frank, you know, the brightly colored stickers. I had older sisters in the '90s, so if you don't know what that is, but the Liz Frank fracture in his foot. I don't know if that's what it was, but he's having surgery on his foot and is going to miss 5 to 12 weeks. And so Carson Wentz is really of no relevance. I mean, he was going to be down my list anyway, kind of because of how that team is structured,
You were
despite the
big
fact
into
that I think he
Carson
was going to have a
Wentz
good year.
for many
Yeah,
episodes.
and I just started him moving him down primarily because you know it's a run heavy attack with a strong defense, which just it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is, and we'll see that with some of these guys that we'll talk about later. That if you don't need them, then the fantasy production just isn't there.
And I was always anti Carson Wentz, just for the record. So I turned out right on that.
Well, I guess I was selling my futures before this happened, so I had already started the fire sale before the injury happened. But you know, we wish him well, and it may be fun if they're lingering around towards the end of the season to have Carson Wentz come back and be Mr. Hero leading into the playoffs. So it will be fun to see his return and see what that looks like. We can talk about that when the time is right. But for now, Carson Wentz is not someone to focus on in your draft. But what you do need to focus on, we've talked about this a ton, when you're talking about quarterback drafting, like all of the players, but I think really specifically with quarterbacks, it's value, 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 right? Is thinking about where you're going to take them. Is it worth the draft capital you're going to give up to take your quarterback where you get him, or is it better to wait and take somebody else that's you know maybe in a more premium position for fantasy football if you can get another strong running back or something in that place? And that sort of leads us to this tier one of quarterbacks where you know I think there's a pretty clear delineation based off of production last year certainly of Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Kyler Murray. And I've seen pretty much everybody has this group sort of interchangeable around that, with Mahomes being the clear cut number one.
Yeah, and like we've talked about, I don't think either of us are going to end up owning any of these quarterbacks on our team. And going back to that value discussion, right? So Patrick Mahomes is the easy example of this. We've had this conversation before. He is likely to be the QB1. The odds would say he is the favorite to be fantasy's QB1. But look at the difference in the QB1 as far as points versus the QB10, for example. I'm looking at my league's stats, which is a 6 points per passing touchdown league, so it's a little bit different. So Aaron Rodgers was actually number one last year. But Mahomes was at 418. Let's see. Hold on. This was organized the wrong way. And then Tannehill, for example, is at 384. So there's just, I don't know how deep you want to go into these guys as far as maybe breaking down who should go first, because I think there's an argument for Josh Allen over Mahomes, maybe. And it's obviously close with Kyler too. But I think our overall advice is to not really go for one of these guys, right?
Yeah, and I actually I broke down some numbers looking at this, and at first I was like, "Oh, that's pretty good," and then I thought about it. It's really not a big difference. So over the last 2 seasons, the top 5 QBs in fantasy football averaged 3 points per game more than QBs 6 through 10. That can be a difference maker, but
It's a
in
great
a
stat.
season, how many games do you lose by 3 points? And is the difference, in 20, 30, 40 picks later, you get a quarterback that's, 3 points less per game, but at that time you got that strong RB2 or something that can be kind of harder to find. So as much as I love these guys, and I gotta say, maybe this is me being like a mini homer. I'm originally from Arizona. I think Kyler Murray is getting totally disrespected. I think this offense is good and the defense is not very good. I think Kyler Murray's going to have a fantastic year, but I'm with you. In our sort of pro league that we drafted when we did a mock draft, these guys fell another 10, 15 spots from where average draft position is in other people's leagues. And that's where I started feeling the pressure to go get Josh Allen or Kyler Murray. They're not going to get there in the majority of your drafts. And so once you start getting to the 40s and 50s and you want to start looking at some of these guys, there are guys, this next tier, we can just jump right into it. The next tier here is, as we see it, sort of Lamar Jackson, and this is based off of ADP, but also kind of closely reflects some of our rankings, I think. Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, uh, what is Herbert's name? Justin. I don't know why that just flew out of my head. And Aaron Rodgers. So this next tier still looks pretty similar. A lot of mobility. I mean, Lamar Jackson's a totally different animal than everybody else in this group from a mobility standpoint. But mobility, high flying offenses, lots of points to score, and you're getting some of these guys right now. Aaron Rodgers is going what 30, almost 30 spots behind Josh Allen. So 3 rounds later, you're getting a guy with very clear top 5 upside. And in the meantime, you've been able to snag, some other key pieces. So I think that's where I love these top 3 guys. And if somebody has a Lamar Jackson esque season, then it may not matter where you draft them, right? They can be league winners, but most likely they're going to be just a little bit better than everybody else.
All right, I have several thoughts I had, but you just made me think who's your league winner this year or two?
Um, to be
Think about
honest,
Lamar Jackson 2 years ago in round 8 or, Josh Allen.
I
Who's this year's?
the couple of guys that I think that you can probably get tremendous value on that have the potential to be QB1 based off of their capabilities and how offenses could shake out this year. I'm all the way back in on Lamar Jackson. I think that offense can get retooled. They know that they have to make some changes, and they've added a couple of pieces at wide receiver. Not the most exciting, but it doesn't take that much for. I mean, this receiving core was not any
There's
better
one
2 years
exciting pick
ago.
there,
Yeah, I
a
know
wide
people are
receiver. We'll
very
talk
excited
about him
about
later.
Rashad Bateman. Yeah, but and then the other guy, it's not sexy, but Russell Wilson has the capability of being the overall QB1. And he just, every single year, he goes out and performs at an elite level. He's got tons of talent around him. Um, and I think they'll be smarter about that offense. So I like these guys. And quite frankly, personally, I think I will end up owning one of these guys more often than I intend to going into the draft. It's just hard for me to pass on these. They're so solid and they're so reliable. The one that stands out to me, I love Justin Herbert, but where he's being taken, his average draft position is QB7, going to 52nd overall. I don't know, right? It's a small sample size. I think he has the tools and the talent to be elite, but the guys that are around him, I know what I'm getting with Aaron Rodgers. I know what I'm getting with Russell Wilson. And taking a chance on Lamar Jackson doesn't really scare me because he was awful last year as a passer and he ended up as QB10.
Very true. Yeah, for me, that guy is Matt Stafford this year. Because if he's QB 12 off the board, which I think he'll actually end up being higher than that. Um, like for example, Tom Brady's at 9. I wouldn't even think twice about taking Stafford before Brady. And there's several guys I think in that camp, but you know, to your earlier points, well, all I was thinking about is what advice can we give our listeners? Thank you all for being out there at FFB Podcast on Twitter. Like, what's the next level advice that we can give you? I guess, and to me, when you were breaking down the kind of the tiers, the first two tiers, I'm thinking about when is that run going to be in your draft? And so, is it at the end of the second? Is it kind of like one of the things that we've talked about before is that there is a little bit of predictability in your league, generally speaking, because there's usually a couple people who aren't as in tuned as maybe some other people you're playing with, and so you're almost at least every league that I'm in, you usually see Pat Mahomes go in round one, right? Am I wrong on that? Do you see that too?
In the first 2 rounds. Yeah,
At
I mean
least in
it's
the
and this is
teams,
what it used
if
to be
not the
like with
first round.
Aaron Rodgers too a few years ago,
Right,
right? Like
right. So I'm thinking about when that run's going to be. Someone's going to jump on Mahomes early, and then I would expect probably maybe the beginning of the third in the mid 20s, early 20s. Okay, there goes Allen, there goes Murray, there goes Jackson. And so for me, that's where you start to think about, okay, well, I'm sitting here at maybe 40, 45, but now 4 or 5 teams have their quarterbacks, and we're in a 12-team league. So you're starting to think about who is available, like, and I'm looking at, you know, so if it's 12-team league, who those bottom tier quarterbacks are, those starting quarterbacks. There's just so many options there. Like this is maybe of all years that I've played fantasy, the one year where I'm like, yeah, I definitely there are guys that I want, but I'm not reaching at all. Probably even into tier two that you're talking about. Unless someone falls a few spots lower than they really should, like Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson. I mean, Herbert obviously is going to be great. Rodgers, it just depends on where they fall. But like, if I miss out on all those guys, there are so many options after that that I'm not even looking in these first two tiers at all, to be honest with you.
yeah, and I think for me, so last year I drafted Lamar or Dak Prescott. I think probably end of the fourth, into the fifth round in a couple of leagues, and of course I was rewarded handsomely for a few weeks. You can't
Well,
account for
yeah,
injuries, but I was really happy with the pick, and if things had continued, I don't assume he would have been the QB1, but if things had continued and he was playing anything at that caliber, I would have been thrilled with the outcome because I was excited about Dak Prescott in that offense last year. I feel similarly about a lot of these guys here. So let me throw this out to you because I'm looking at overall average draft position in this is off the Fantasy Pros. They sort of aggregate across a bunch of platforms. So let's look at this. Aaron Rodgers going 54th, right? And he's kind of towards the back end of that tier in average draft position. But right around him, you've got there's Justin Herbert there, Cooper Cup, DJ Moore. You got your pick of Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews. Knowing you already have your tight end. Kenny
I think so.
Galladay, Tyler Lockett, Miles Gaskin. I mean, so this is where I get into that place where there's a lot of good names, but I start balancing this out in my head. I'm like, I know that every week I can lock in Aaron Rodgers on what is going to be probably the second best offense in the NFL at my quarterback position, or I could get Cooper Cup, who I love, but hopefully he's my wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. So this is what I'm playing with here, and if I love one of these quarterback names, I'm likely to grab someone here. What I'm not going to do is if there's a run 10 picks ahead of this, I'm not diving into that fray. Right? If there's some of these names
Yeah,
that start falling that you're surprised, you got to grab those names.
I agree. That's one of the pieces of advice we gave in our draft strategy show is like, if there's a run, don't panic. That doesn't mean you have to go along with it. Um, Now, I guess I tend to disagree with what you were saying about the overall ADP right now. If Rodgers is at 54, Kyle Pitts is right there, Cooper Kupp is right there, DJ Moore is right there, and then a lot like Tyler Lockett, Jamar Chase, Mark Andrews. There's a lot of guys that I think could help you win your league right here, and so I would not, just because Rodgers is a relatively good value there. I think just because of the depth of the position, I would go for one of those skill position guys and leave Rodgers alone. To be honest with you, if I could take Pitts right there instead, that's a huge home run for me. I got to tell you.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with how your first 4 rounds broke out, right? So what decisions you've made earlier, if you feel comfortable, in my situation, if I'm here, hopefully I've got my RB1, a clear cut RB1, maybe a strong wide receiver one, if not 2 running backs already. And maybe I get one of these top 3 tight ends because we talked about the premium on the tight end position. Um, and then if you're not in love with these names, which I'm not, I don't know how the Rams offense is going to shake out on Cooper Kupp, right, and DJ Moore and some of these guys. And I love Kyle Pitts, but
I don't know,
like I
man.
said,
I like
hopefully I
both
already
those
have a
guys.
tight end.
I
So,
like both those guys a lot. Both
but
those.
what I do worry about, well, I do think that there's value on some of these guys, and we'll talk a little bit about some of our sleepers later. There's definitely guys down the line that you can grab that are going to make a big difference. So it's just going to come down to when it's your turn to click that mouse or to throw your pickup on the board. Is there somebody there that you mostly you're just really excited to pick? I think that's the big difference, and then you can wait on a quarterback because you're going to be okay. So there's a lot to weigh here, but you're not going to don't panic. That's such a key point. And you're not going to fall to pieces because we're going to give you probably 5 names that are going to go 40 picks later that you can slot in and probably have a great season with. And then another strategy that we'll talk about is if you end up in those later rounds, a second QB that's a little bit of a gamble that could be that league winner that we're not expecting. That's a great way to go too. But I want to do a little game with you. This may be easier than I expect, but as I was thinking about it, it was a little bit of a challenge for me. So we're going to play a little bit of better or worse. So you're going to tell me if you think that these guys are going to outperform their fantasy position last year, and these are in standard leagues. So Patrick Mahomes finished as QB4 last year. Better or worse?
I'm going to go better since he is
It's an
projected to
easy.
be. Yeah, this one didn't take much thought since he's the best QB on paper. Um, I would think that he could be in the top 3. Therefore, I would go better.
This one is a little tougher. Russell Wilson, better or worse?
So he was at 6. Is that right?
At 6. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
This one is tough. I will go. I wish I could push, but I'm going to go lower.
You're gonna go lower. Okay. I'm gonna take the
Barely.
over on this. I'm a it's tough, but I'm a believer in Russ and this offense this year. And this is another one. Now that I'm looking at this, it feels so much easier all of a sudden. Lamar Jackson finished as QB10. How do we feel about Lamar Jackson? Over or under? Better or worse?
Yeah, you got to go better here. They've improved the roster around him a little bit as far as receiving threats. So I'll go. He's probably likely to me in the 6 to 8 range.
Okay, so you're not putting a you don't think a top 5 finish is likely for Lamar Jackson.
I wouldn't say it's likely. I think it's definitely possible, but no, I don't think it's likely to be in the top 5.
Well, that was a boring game, but but now we've
You
got ourselves.
tried.
I know. I tried. I tried to be spicy, and it's not helpful. So, as I was looking at this, so QB 8 and 9 that are coming off the board, there's a 20 pick gap there, right? So there, this is really what we're saying is those first 7 guys in most drafts are flying off the board, and if it's too rich for your blood and it's too early, then you get to start mopping up guys that are left. For every quarterback that's taken, there is a pick left on the board that can help your team. And so if you're able to be patient and there are guys that you like down the line, you're going to be able to grab some of those other positions, and your opponents are going to be weaker in those areas. So um, that leads us to, I think, where this can be helpful. So let's start with people that we think are being underdrafted. So we'll go sort of sleepers at the quarterback position, because we missed out on the top seven. They flew off the board. We didn't panic. Who else is on the board here that you're looking at later? You've mentioned Matt Stafford. He's QB 11 in drafts right now, 84th pick, which is, you know, uh, what is that? That's almost 60 picks later than Josh Allen at number two. So who else is there
Hmm.
for you?
Yeah, Stafford's absolutely the number one answer. As far as being underdrafted, I hate to contradict myself a little bit, but Tom Brady. I mean, if he's at 72, and last year, at least at the list that I'm looking at from my main league, he was like QB 7. That's a you know that's a good value. So I would say he's probably being underdrafted, and I tend to do that myself too. Well, he's old. How much longer is he going to keep this up? And yet he continues to deliver. So I would also go with Ryan Tannehill there. Um, Again, it's just about where he finished last year. He's only added weapons on offense. I think he was QB 8 maybe in the list that I'm looking at here. So that would be my top three, I think.
Yeah, and Tannehill's going off the board, QB 10 in the 80s as well. So in the eighth round, or I mean, I guess eighth round of a 10 team draft. So I like the value there. I think
Did he lose his
you know
offensive coordinator?
yeah, and they just promoted within. They'll just keep the same system, and they
So there
added
was some
Julio
criticism
Jones.
there, but I'm not necessarily buying that.
No, and that defense, the pass rush might have gotten a little bit better, but that defense isn't going to be totally different overnight. They're still going to have to score points, and they're going to get to play the Texans twice and the Jaguars twice, right? Am I thinking of the right division? I'm
Correct.
rusty here,
In the Colt, or
but
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I want 4 games against the two worst defenses in the NFL. I want that. So I love Ryan Tannehill. I think so. Tom Brady is going QB 9. Um, I think that's close to his ceiling. So I'll save this for my next question here. But Stafford, I think you're right. I think Stafford's a value. Other guys, I mean, we've talked about it before. I have this love for Matt Ryan. That offensive system sets him up for success every single year. The guy just delivers 4,000 yard seasons, and Kyle Pitts is an animal. And I'm not worried about Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage and random guy off the street, whoever else is going to be that offense. I think it's going to be still a pretty high flying offense, and I like Matt Ryan. It's going at QB 15 at the 117th pick, so he's a guy. If I feel like I want a little bit of insurance policy, I'm looking at Matt Ryan really late in drafts to stick on my bench and see how that season starts shaking out of my two QBs who I'm looking at. And then I'll use this to sort of tease a question here. Justin Fields, as buzzy as all this is, I don't expect him to start day one. The team doesn't seem to expect him to start day one, but he's going QB 20, 143rd overall. So, I mean, this is the end of your draft, just about. And, while everybody's snapping up defenses, you might be able to go get yourself some Justin Fields. Is he worth a roster spot to you? This is actually a question that we got from our buddy Justin asking about Justin Fields. Should he be rostering him out of the draft?
I think 100% it's worth the draft pick. You're asking an Ohio State fan, so I'm a little biased here, but I think he was drafted to a really good situation. I think two teams in front of them should have drafted him that didn't. Whether or not he starts right away, like you said, he probably won't. Yes, absolutely worth an investment because where you can get him uh, versus the upside that he possesses, absolutely, I'm all in on Fields.
Yeah, and this is a situation where he's likely taking the place of a fifth wide receiver or a
Exactly.
total just shot in the dark running back or your third tight end or something ridiculous. So I'm there with you. As long as he keeps falling and I feel like I'm really comfortable and have the depth I need on my team, I'm trying to grab him. And I'll go ahead and move that one further. What do you think about rostering Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson to start the season? Zach Wilson's going to be the day one starter in New York. There's been a lot of great things coming out about what he's capable of in an interesting offense coming with Robert Sala and all them coming from the 49ers. And then, of course, Trey Lance not likely to start for a while, but has that elite skill set.
So have I missed anything on the 49ers front? I mean, he's not going to be like Jimmy G is still going to be starting week 1, and the way I was reading things, Lance might be kind of situationally used. Am I wrong on that?
That's what they're saying. Like in my mind, I'm seeing this very similar to Justin Fields. Like I don't know that Andy Dalton is much better than Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback, and I don't think anybody can pretend that Jimmy G is a particularly gifted quarterback. He's a game manager, and that's where Andy Dalton is at this point in his career too. So I see them very similar. I see both of these guys starting at some point in this season. But it'll be interesting. And Trey Lance in that offense could be could be pretty epic. I mean, that's an incredible offense that Shanahan runs there in San Francisco. It's just a matter of what does he go in there because this offense doesn't really rely on the quarterback position at all.
Well, and that's why I would say that Fields, in my mind, has higher upside than Lance does, but they do have similar kind of ceilings if they're given the keys to the car, if you will, in high-powered offenses. They could get a lot going there, right? So, um, wait, what was your initial question? You're just asking me about Lance, right?
Well,
Or
and Zach
versus
Wilson,
Wilson.
are you?
Yes, I have
Well, it's
Wilson
just
above
are you
Lance.
rostering these guys? Yeah.
I'm interested in both of them, absolutely, towards the end of the draft, regardless of how I feel about my starting quarterback, because I think both of those guys have a lot of upside. I'd probably take Wilson over Lance just based on the role. And the Jets are going to be terrible, so therefore they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Um, so yeah, I would roster both of them. I like Wilson a little bit more, but I think I'm interested in both.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this earlier. We were talking about our rankings, and it's an interesting. I don't suggest that anybody take the time and rank out the top 35 quarterbacks. It's a ridiculous exercise. But
I
when it
think
comes to
everyone should
certain
do it.
guys like this, there are quarterbacks in this league that unless the craziest thing happens, you would never have them on your roster. And so when it comes to actually doing your rankings, there's part of you that just wants to take those six guys that are starters, but you never want to start for your team and just put them at the very end of your rankings and put Trey Lance and some of these guys that are just more like Taysom Hill, right? If Taysom Hill's a starter, he's very interesting from a fantasy standpoint. I don't think he's a particularly talented
Not to
quarterback, but
me, but yes, he is.
hey, he won me some playoff games. I can't hate on the guy. Uh, so one thing I'll just mention this because I think people are curious about it. One name that we haven't brought up at all is Tua Tagovailoa, and if you remember going into last season, it was a trendy name, right? Because there was all this conversation about how he was this great dual threat quarterback. Didn't really translate on the field. I assume we're in agreement that there's no interest here, but should we be surprised by that? I mean, is it surprising that he's being drafted as 22nd overall quarterback, and I really thought that would be higher just because people like to speculate.
I think there's some value there, but you're correct in that. Yeah, I'm not interested. That's not me trying to stand on some hill and say I know that this guy is not going to, hit a certain ceiling or provide a certain value if you draft him. I'm just not a big fan, and I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. So I'm just not that interested in him. Um, and we didn't talk about Dak's injury issues either, did we?
No, no, let's
because
talk about
he's
it.
got
Share.
some arm or shoulder thing on top of recovering from the ankle, and the only thing I'll say to that is like it gives me a little pause whether or not he's really going to be ready to go week one. But also, it also might drop his receiving core a couple spots for me too if I don't trust that that quarterback is going to be healthy this season. So that's a huge question mark for me. So it's something that I've listened to the last couple of days that again gave me some pause about like, oh, is he really? Is this offense going to be where we want them to be? Because we all are talking about the Cowboys right now as having arguably the best receiving core in football, but they don't have a backup quarterback. And if Prescott's not healthy, like they literally have nobody. So I don't know. That's a big question mark for me.
Oh, come on. I just told you Ben DiNucci looked great on Thursday night. He was slinging it, sort of sidearmed. I know it was the weirdest thing.
Like I said, they have
No,
no
no, no. I
backup
mean,
quarterback.
no. This is legitimate, and I mean, I based off of what I'm hearing, I imagine he'll be out there week one. But there are questions here. I mean, this is a serious injury. Do they limit his mobility, which is a true addition of Dax? I think he probably is averaging 5 rushing touchdowns per 16 games or something like that. I mean, that's a nice addition to what you're doing. Uh, does some of that go away? And the other guy that is in the same vein that I want to mention that I want to be in love with, but actually what's coming out of camp has me very concerned is Joe Burrow. He's a guy we've talked about a lot, and I think he might be a top 10 guy for us if it sounded like he was in a
Yeah.
better space. When your veteran wide receiver comes out and says he just doesn't look comfortable, he doesn't look confident, it's a concerning thing. It can take a while for you to come back from something. I mean, he tore every ligament he had.
Yeah, he was the other guy I was going to bring up too, so I'm glad you did because I was pretty high on Joe Burrow. I don't know, whenever that was, we were a couple episodes ago, I guess at this point.
It was
But
probably like episode 3. We're on 26. It was a while
okay,
ago that we
couple.
we started our fandom.
Because I was excited about the Jamar Chase draft pick too. But you're right. I mean, they bolstered their offensive line a little bit. I wouldn't say they made it top 10. That's definitely a fact. Um, and so here, I've heard some of these reports too, right? About he's just not confident, I think, um, as he was prior to the injury. And so it makes you pause again a little bit about like, he's got a ton of upside, a great receiving core. That could be a really good offense, a top 15 offense, I think, this year, if he's there and healthy. But that was a devastating injury. I mean, when we watched that, we thought, okay, this is Kirk Cousins, or not Cousins. Who am I thinking of from the Chiefs and then the Wizards?
Yeah, Alex.
Alex Smith. I don't know why I said
Yeah, that
Cousins.
guy.
I mean, it was that level of like devastation of like, holy hell, this guy's leg just snapped in multiple places and he could be in serious medical danger. Forget the future of his playing career. And so he recovered fairly well from that. I think a lot of those concerns were alleviated. But man, yes, I have concerns about Joe Burrow and therefore am second guessing some of those receivers as well if he's not 100%. And it's a question mark right now.
Well, and if you want, this it's not fair because it's for different reasons. But if you want a comparison, take Baker Mayfield from 2 years ago. Very talented quarterback. We've seen this. We've seen what he's capable of. He had totally lost his confidence. The way the offense was structured, the way everything was playing, he was running for his life. He didn't. You could just see it. He did not feel confident about the things he was doing as a quarterback, and he started doing bad things. You become a bad athlete when you are thinking too
Yeah.
much or you are hesitating too much, and especially at the quarterback position, that just doesn't work. And Burrow's a guy who has some mobility, right? That he added a fair bit in the what 10, 7, 9, whatever games he played last year. I mean, he played most of the season, and he
Yeah.
looked good. And so yeah, he's definitely somebody. I mean, if he just plummets, he might be somebody that I roster because it's something that you can pick up quickly. It may just take one really good practice, to be honest, but he's not somebody at this. There are guys around him that I think have much more possibility. and I'm far more interested.
Yeah, I mean, of all the
Um,
sophomore slump candidates, I think his floor is the lowest of them, right? I mean, he could, if he's not 100% with it, he could fall apart pretty quickly. To your point, there's some value there if that happens because he could recover quickly. But boy, his floor is a little bit lower than I'd like it to be, I think.
well, and thanks for using that phrase. This reminds me that we have another question from a listener. This one comes from Brandon, and he's asking. I referenced my feelings about Justin Herbert this year, and asking if he's a likely sophomore slump candidate, and how Brandon Staley's new offense is likely to impact him. What do you think about this? How are you feeling? He was QB9 last year, and by all counts had a particularly remarkable year for a freshman quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned, I guess, would be the short answer. Um, Again, it kind of comes back to, is he going to be a target that I'm looking at as far as where he's being drafted? I think he's at QB like 47 overall or something like that. QB7, is that right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm not that concerned about Herbert. He looked really, really special last year. As we've talked about, I owned him in a couple leagues and was happy to have him. So I don't think, again, talking about the floor, if I'm looking at him versus Joe Burrow, who's, I guess, QB 13, so it's not really the same conversation. But if I'm talking about Herbert versus Brady, for example, I'm still going to bet on the upside of Herbert there instead of Brady, who's QB 9. Um, that's just me personally. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, so I have him as a bit of an overdraft, but that's only because he's going one pick later than Russell Wilson, who is a very known quantity, and two picks before Aaron Rodgers, who is a very known quantity to me, and that I know what that offense is. And then
I'd
20
rather have
picks
Rodgers
later,
than Herbert. I will say that.
yeah, and 20 picks later is where Brady is. If Herbert were to fall back into that space a little bit, I'm much more interested. I like those other two guys right there. So it's not to say that he's overdrafted because I don't think he'll have a good year. I like the security of these guys that are known. I mean, known to be elite. But when it comes to this offense, if anything, I do think get Joe Lombardi, who's a new offensive coordinator coming over from New Orleans. I think they're going to do some different scheme stuff. I think it's going to open things up a little bit for Herbert and actually maybe take some pressure off of him. And that defense has to be better. So I think it can kind of. I think he's going to have a great year. Um, I don't think that, well, it's probably within his range of outcomes. I have no expectation of him being a top five fantasy football quarterback, but some of these other guys,
But that
I
ceiling is
think, can do
there.
that. Yeah, it's
If
a
I were betting on
possibility,
Herbert,
but
I'd say like 9 to 12 is where he ends up finishing. But that's not the end of the world. But he does have
yeah,
that
I
upside
think he
though.
will. Yeah, I think if you get him in that 8 to 10 range, I think he's going to return that value for sure. I would be comfortable with that slot. I think I don't think you're going to look back on this season unless something goes terribly wrong for this team and say, "Wow, he had a bad year." I think you're going to end up with a really nice year from Justin Herbert. Um,
Yeah, but
it's
look at it
just
this way. Like
it is a little risky.
Rodgers, Brady, Jalen Hurts, Tannehill, and Stafford. Would you be all that surprised if all five of those quarterbacks finished better than Herbert this year?
No,
Because I wouldn't be. And so therefore you're talking about Herbert as like QB 13 then. And even then, okay, if Joe Burrow's healthy, I could see him outperforming Herbert. Um, Beyond that, it's kind of questionable. Like, I don't know, but still, that's like Deshaun Watson, maybe, I guess, if he plays. I don't know what's going to happen with him. But there's a gap there, right? And so I likely won't be reaching for Herbert, I guess is excuse me, my takeaway there. Even though I think he can provide tremendous value, I'm looking for some of those guys that are going a little bit later.
yeah, and let's real quick. We'll touch on Deshaun Watson. There's rumors about a trade to the Eagles. Technically speaking, he's allowed to play right now. He's still saying that he will not play it down for the Texans. The Texans say they hope that he's going to play for them.
He was on the field
There's
talking to the
this
GM today. I saw that.
Yeah, because they're buds all of a sudden. Maybe the GM knows a good lawyer, but Watson's in some bad shape, and it is likely that he will not play football this year. But he's still being drafted at QB 17, and if he were to play a season and you don't have the scruples about putting him on your roster, he could be a great value. He's not somebody that I'm drafting in any of my leagues unless I just hate all my options and I need a dart throw. But I really don't see him playing football this year. And, even if he goes to Philly, I don't know how excited I am about that anyway in a new system at the last second. So he's not playing for the Texans this year.
I don't know if I'd go as I don't know. I guess I'm not as extreme in my take on Watson as you are. In that, I wouldn't be surprised if he played this year. I'm assuming that the team and the league are trying to resolve his civil or whatever case it is as soon as possible because he hasn't been placed on the commissioner exempt list, which would be a big red flag, obviously, and that could still happen. But I don't know. Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I'm expecting at some point in time.
yeah, but you
Which
wonder why
then
he
you could
already
just he
hasn't
could
been
just
placed
leave
on
him
that.
there. It's purgatory.
Yeah, but I wonder why he hasn't been placed on that already, though. So there's just a lot of unknowns to your point. So like, I would absolutely feel great about drafting him late, especially if you have if you're in a league that has a lot of roster spots. Um, I'll take a shot on him and throw him on. You won't be able to put him on IR because he'll be listed as I don't know. It wouldn't be PUP, but I, I don't know. Correct. He would just be out, right? And you couldn't put him on
Yeah,
IR.
no, no, because he would be unavailable or something like that. And yeah,
I
I
don't.
could. I've had that before.
Right, right. So I'm not opposed to gambling on him if you can stash him and if you kind of like waited really late on your QBs and you don't feel great about the guy that you got. I'm okay with that. So I'm a little more optimistic than you, I think.
Well, so is there anybody else here in particular that you've got a strong take on and want to bring up?
Hmm. Strong is the operative word there, I guess. I mean, there are. I'm just looking at this group of guys in kind of like tier 4 and 5 that I don't feel bad about if I have them as my starter. So like Ryan Fitzpatrick, or Zach Wilson, or Derek Carr. There are guys like if you really want to just go all in on I'm absolutely going to wait till the last possible minute on my QB. There are so many options for you to do that. And so I don't love some of these guys, but I'm not angry at myself for having them as my starter if I waited and prioritized other positions ahead of the QB and am starting Zach Wilson. Like I we've hammered this point home over and over. I think of all the years, this is the strategy every year. You should really wait on quarterback. But man, what an extreme amount of depth at this position this year, and I think a handful of guys that you could get at the end of your draft or undrafted that could end up making a tremendous impact on your team. And it's not always like that every year, right? There might be one of those guys, but there's like two or three of those guys that might not get drafted at all, or fall really late in your drafts, depending on how many positions you're drafting, that could make a huge impact. So I think my only takeaway would just be to say, don't forget about some of these guys at the end of this list because a lot of them are going to be serviceable or even potentially high ceiling long shots to help you win your league. So,
Well, and I'll throw my PSA in here. The first couple weeks of the season, keep your eyes open. Watch what these guys do on the field. Watch how their teams perform. And maybe it's not even just the numbers. Just kind of check in accuracy. Literally watch them play and see how they look, how they feel. I mean, that's where there's usually somebody, and it's not usually a rookie. So Justin Herbert was sort of an anomaly last year, but there are usually a couple of guys like that emerge, and if you can snap them up, you either have a better starting quarterback than you drafted, or you've got a beautiful trade piece later in the season. So keep an eye on guys that aren't on your roster as well. right? Because we can sit here and imagine how these teams are actually going to function, but some of these guys are going to underperform, and some of these people are going to shine when we didn't see it coming. So make sure you're always paying attention, always listening to us. We will tell you who to target in your waivers each week, because that's that's where you really actually win these things. You can't really win your draft or win your league at the draft. You could probably lose it if you make terrible choices. Derek Carr is your QB1, for example. But so if you have any additional questions, obviously we didn't talk about everybody here, please put them in the chat on our YouTube page or tweet us at FFB Podcast. Is that right?
You are correct.
All right. One of these days I'll feel confident about this. But we would love to get your questions and give you whatever answer we're going to give you, good or bad. We'll both answer, and then you can pick who you like better. That's fine. But thank you for listening. We've got another in the series of these. We will run through these by position and get you ready for your draft and tackle all of the hard issues. Anything I'm missing here, Greg?
No, I don't think so. I already gave my QB spiel, right? There's just so many options. There are options beyond the top 30 that we ranked that I think could be difference makers on your team. And so don't just take it easy on the QBs this year. Take it easy, focus on the skill positions. You'll get a QB eventually, and that'll help you win your league.
You heard it here first, people. All right. We will be back to talk running backs. Goodbye.
Adios.